Woo! You've done enough, Lord. Yeah. Oh, my. Yeah. 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 Oh, my. You've done enough. Yes, you have. Hey. Glory. Hallelujah. Woo! Woo!
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories. More people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay in line with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
Do you want this? Will this move us forward toward our path of ultimately creating self-sufficient family units? Is this equitable in its distribution? Is this something that we feel like we can accomplish? And then I think secondarily is we have to figure out what success is. We have to define success. I think sometimes we haven't, in the nonprofits broadly, haven't done a great job of saying this is exactly what we're trying to do. We have these big theoretical statements. I'm going to end generational poverty. I'm not going to do that. I wish I could, but I'm not naive or narcissistic enough to think that I'm that guy that at the end of the day, people are going to be like, yep, he figured it out.
And honest, that's a good response out of a leader. I think that's a good indication of a good leader, because people always want to have the answer and want to be able to lay out a path about how to get there. And sometimes the answer is, I don't know.
Look, at that level, I don't look, if we could have figured it out, and it was that simple, someone would have done it. Right. I'm not the smartest guy to sit in this chair. I'm not the smartest guy to have done this job. Someone before me would have solved it if it was solvable like that. I don't believe it is. I believe that what I can do in my small corner of the world is control a piece of what is a much larger puzzle, right? So for me and for us, defining success is progress along the continuum to self-sufficiency for families, right? And we have to decide how we can do that, right? And we need to get the depth right. I don't want to be in one of those spaces where we talk in a year and I'm like, we've touched 1,000 families. And you're like, what'd you do? And I'm like, we read some books and that was really about it. There's no depth, right? My theory of change is depth, not breadth. So I need to figure out what those steps look like and then be able to say, look, here's the reality of the situation, right? It's 10 families, it's 15, right? The number's not as big as we think it is because the depth required is massive. And then I have to be really intelligent, like you said, to say, okay, what else in the constellation of need do I need to plug into, right? Housing, workforce development, food insecurity, childcare, right? There's all of these things that are happening for different people at different times and with different levels of veracity. I need to be able and be humble enough to say, okay, look, my thing is still important, but it's not the most important thing to this family right now. So how do we sort of hub and spoke that model of like, as the place-based nonprofit, sure, we do our thing and we do it well. And we're really focused on education. We're really focused on youth empowerment and full family engagement. And that's 3 of 50 things that we got to get right, and so we need to be able to say, okay, if we can do that well, I'm proud of that, but it's not going to solve the problem, right? We need to plug into these other things and then by our powers combined over the course of 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, we're looking for progress. Then if we start to if we start to see momentum, we know we're on the right track, right? But having this sort of fallacy of we're going to do it and we're going to fix it is ludicrous, and it just sets us up for failure, right? Because people are going to come back in 2 years being like, why didn't you fix the poverty rate, right? And I'm like, well, I haven't moved in 10 years, so like whatever we're doing isn't working, and we just have to be a little more intelligent and humble about how we move along that path.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a tall task too, there, my man.
It is. I mean, it's sort of
you're the man for the job.
I think I was talking about this the other day. Is I think we have to be very careful. Is there is a certain amount of sort of arrogance that comes with doing a job that's this big and not losing yourself in the fact that it feels so big. And I think for me, it's about, can you just create chunks? It's like, how do you eat an elephant? It's like one bite at a time, so we have to be smart about what we're able to do and do it really, really well. And try and keep focused on, Sam Sanders was talking about this because I asked him, I was like, dude, how do you decide in any given day, like what to do? Right. And he was like, look, you gotta be very clear about what the most pressing issue is and where you can have the most positive impact. And so that's what we're trying to think of too, is like inside of what we do and what we're set up to do well, what can we do right at a really, really high level? And then where can we have the most positive impact? And that's where resources go. And then we could say, look, Charlottesville, you got resources coming out of every orifice. Like, let's figure out how to help continue to put these things together, right? And create a little more of a cohesive ecosystem so it doesn't feel so fragmented, so it doesn't feel so difficult to navigate, so it doesn't feel like people are getting lost, right? I mean, the resources are there. I think the intellect's there. I think it becomes a little bit of a posture of nonprofits to say, look, we need to get in this, we need to row this boat together and figure out how all these pieces, work in cohesion to head where I think ultimately we're all trying to go.
Do you feel like the resources are readily available?
It depends on who you are and who you know.
You know what? But I think you should make a distinction between available and accessible.
Okay.
Because I personally think that they are definitely available.
I agree with you. Here's what I will say. I think that nonprofits spend so much time justifying their existence that sometimes that gets lost in the actual doing of the work. So, for example, if we head down, focus all our energy on doing great work, nobody hears about it. And people say, well, you got to tell a better story. We say, all right, bet. We focus all this energy on telling a better story. They're like, well, that's inauthentic. You should be working harder. And we're going like, all right, well, where do we find the happy medium between doing the right thing and this incentive, which is to make sure everyone knows we're doing the right thing. Because if we disincentivize that, we can't do any more of the right thing. We get caught in this kind of circular argument. And so again, what we're constantly trying to figure out and strength test and understand is like, how do we do that in a way that's agentic to the people for whom we profess to work, right? How do we do it in a way that doesn't feel like I'm co-opting your story, right, to make myself seem smart, right? And what I'm really trying to do is invite you in to say, I want you to tell the story, because ultimately, if we're able to do this together, we can do more of it and do it better. And some of that's trust, right? Some of that is really, you know, I mean, we talk a lot about sort of the community and the donor facing side. We gotta earn the trust of the community, and trust is hard to get and easy to lose. And we have to be very clear about sort of how we walk and how we talk and how we act and how we invite people into places and spaces. And a lot of what we're trying to do is be very intentional about that, of you know, who sits on our board and who tells stories and who we, you know, connect to opportunities and things of this nature. I feel the nonprofit world occasionally has accidentally wrestled some agency away from the people, because that's what we're incentivized to do. We're incentivized to say, look at all the problems we're solving, right? Because that's how we get money, and that's how we, right? And what we're trying to do is challenge that paradigm a little bit, to say, look, there's a way to do the work and also be very genuine about it. And it doesn't, you know, we're not going to please everyone all the time, right? But we have to understand that, you know, without the trust of the community, none of this gets done, right? And without the community being able to look at us, the 9 of us, and all of, but you know, to come to our shop and really understand when we have to have a hard conversation, that I'm doing it because I have your back, and we can work through it like that. If that doesn't exist, it's not, we got nothing. It's not going to work, you know?
And ladies and gentlemen, we are speaking with Price Thomas, Executive Director of City of Promise. And, you know, Price, like, that makes me want to freestyle. I don't know if you realize that your name rhymes with the name of the organization. You know, Price
That's
Thomas,
right.
City of Promise.
I know.
Come on, Max, where you at? Spit a hot 16 for me.
I know. What happens when you when friends with an MC?
Yeah, well, everything just comes in. Right, what is that? I dream in lyric, end in rhyme. Was that the J. Ivy and the Kanye song? Yeah,
that's right. Hey, so and you know, to bring everybody up to speed, to for those that don't know, I wanted to read this blurb from their website. Says at City of Promise, we are committed to a family-centered approach of educational support. First, we honor parents as the experts and most important educators of their children. We respect them as the key decision makers for their children's success. Second, foster strong relationships with families to build the trust and accountability necessary for student achievement. On a typical day, we are coaching parents on Page Street, coaching students at schools, and collaborating with partners to host dual generation programs and traditional after school activities. So, man, that is definitely noble. The direction I wanted to take it is like to get to how we support and like how you really get your work done, because I don't know if you recall, but I was with you and Ravi back when you were at United Way, and like I was on your podcast, and you and I ended up having a discussion within that interview about the connection, about like when you maybe have access to resources or you may have connections, like whatever those resources may be. It doesn't have to be monetary, right? Like it could be like networking, you know, career-based things or what have you. But the acceptance piece, because we're dealing with, you know, with community that gets quite jaded sometimes, like when it comes to seeing organizations come in or folks come in and then they may be there for a little bit, then they're gone, or not getting sort of what's promised. As Max said, City of Promise, like even the name is kind of strong. So I'm curious, like tell us about some of the hurdles that you may have already witnessed, or like some of the tactics that you employ, like when it comes to actually building that trust and getting buy-in for new leadership.
Yeah. There is a
too soon to be talking about new leadership.
I you know, there is something to proximity, and I know this is what this built on. I know Brian Stevenson said it, but there's something about that, about saying, look, I'm here. I'm here, you know, and I'm going to be there, and I'm easy to find, I'm easy to reach. You know, willing to talk, to chat, to hear it, to take it, to absorb it. I think part of it is not coming in with an arrogance that I have all the answers, right? That I've got to learn really what happens day to day and listen to, and that's adults and children, right? Absolutely. I mean, I think that we have to pay homage to the fact that a lot of these young people have unique and you know, very sort of impactful experiences that they need to be able to speak on, and that is going to shape them and their entire worldview. And so what we really want to do is give them an opportunity to feel like they're heard, and to feel like, we take those into account too. And this full family modality is important because exactly what it says. And I think what people understand is that your parents or caretakers, whoever is in your family unit, are the most impactful people in your life. Right.
Yep.
And for me, it was lucky enough to be, mom and dad, and I had aunts and uncles who were nearby. And so whoever is in that close circle is going to be able to pull all of those levers. And so, I think sometimes when we look at how we parse out these issues, we say, okay, well, what are the schools doing? And the schools are trying their best. But if we're working with the kid from 8 to 3, what happens from 3 to 7:45? Right.
Yeah.
So if we're taking one step forward and one step back, we can't make progress like that.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? Right. And I think that I approach it, and I think I have to, with the idea that all caretakers, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, older brother, cousin, whoever, want the best for these young people, right? They're trying their best.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that they're doing it right all the time, but they want it to go well. Right. And so what we have to do, if we approach it like that, we say, okay, that's fair. And now how do we make it better? And where can we plug in, right? With sort of a posture of honesty, but also empathy, to say, look, here's what we're going to hold you accountable to, but here's what we can support. And I think what we don't want to do is overshoot our support metric and say, we'll just try and fix it, right? Because ultimately that doesn't help you do anything for yourself, right? My theory of change is kind of, I'm here for a good time, not a long time, right? Like, I don't want you in my program. Look, I hear people tell these stories all the time. Like, I've been with so-and-so organization since I was 5. I'm like, why? Right? Like, what? Like, for what? Right? Like, we are trying to get you out. Like, I want you to be able to do all of these things for yourself, right? I want you and your family unit to be able to do these things for yourself.
That's a dangerous conversation,
right? 100%. It is. It absolutely is.
What
right?
you mean? You want me out?
Well, that's what I'm saying. But I want to equip you with the tools to not need me. And so,
but
I
it's
think, no, go.
It's an odd thought process, because there are a lot of people who would get up in arms about the idea of the goal being for you to not be reliant upon X, Y, or Z resources, because, there's a variety of reasons, but, there's nothing, they don't have anything to help sustain them if they leave this program or do this or do that. And there are people here to get upset with that idea.
So my best analogy is physical therapy. So my previous world was sports. And so my thinking is that I've had surgeries, I've done a lot of physical therapy. The physical therapist's goal is to get me back onto the field. Now, if I roll that ankle again, I'm going to come back. But the goal is not for me to keep taking ice baths and doing stretches for the next 6 weeks. Is to get back to training and get back to the game. Right. And so the way I think about this is that, trying to be, again, understand that these issues are immensely complex and intersectional, and they rotate and revolve and change. Right. But is there a way to say that we're going to look to make progress every year? And then there a line, and that off you go. And we're not going in. Look, again, I'm not naive enough to think that there will be, where you hear people say, my job's to put myself out of a job. Like, okay, fair enough. And that's a good soundbite, right? But ultimately it's to, can we create opportunities for families to say, yeah, I got this. Right. And then if you don't got it, or something happens, fair. But everything that we do is going to be geared towards that ultimate goal of being like, you got it for yourself. Right. And this is why I talk about when I say, it might be that our thing in as it pertains to you is the third most important thing. We might have to help you connect to workforce development, or you need to attain a skill or pay a fine or whatever it is. And we can be responsive to that. But is everything that we're doing, are we having that conversation about, okay, how does this push you further on the continuum towards what we're considering self-sufficiency, right? And does this give you the tools you need to sustain that, barring something unforeseen.
Right.
And so what we want to do is make sure that we're putting people on that path, not creating circles of codependency where it's like, why are you coming back every month? And we keep doing the same thing every month. We're not having the right conversation, right? We're not digging far enough to say, okay, what really is causing this level of recidivism? And again, I say this because I think incentive wise, we're like, look, we're helping. Okay, sort of, right? But ultimately isn't, I think this sort of level of self-actualization is what we all aspire to, like I want you to be able to do it for yourself and make those decisions for yourself. And I think from what, we know and what we've seen and people we talk to, most people are like, yeah, I want to whatever my dreams are, right? Get a new house, get a new car, send my kid to college, take a cruise. I don't care. That's entirely up to you, whatever those goals are. And I want you to be able to achieve those absent of my intervention, right? And we will be there as a support system. We'll move and change as community needs change. But I don't want to get stuck in this thing where our help, right, becomes just creating another hamster wheel of people who need to come back, right? If you come to us, fine. You know what I'm saying? But I want you to, have the opportunity to really experience that level of fulfillment. And our goal is to, again, in everything that we do, be very analytical about, like, okay, is this a Band-Aid thing, which we got to solve short-term needs 100%. But underneath that, are we creating the right, sort of up into the right direction for these families?
And I guess just to carry on that conversation, a lot of people argue that there's some institutional barriers that we cannot get around. So
yeah, well, and sure, absolutely. And there, I mean, look, there's like policy change. There's just sort of, I mean, we can talk about kind of the entire structure of capitalism itself, right? And again, I'm not, this is not Price sitting here like saying he's going to change the world. But what sure if I do nothing else, what I want to do is at least shift the way we think about it. And try and push our people and our communities to think bigger about the art of the possible, right? And I want that to hopefully create some momentum for someone smarter than me to figure out the ins and outs and the nuts and bolts, right? To say, oh, we might be onto something. Let's put it into practice, right? Or at least catalyze enough people that now we can create a consortium of people that are like, oh yeah, maybe we can sort of shift the incentives of some of these nonprofits into creating programs that do X, Y, Z, right? And so, I think that there are like massive, kind of, tectonic level of things that need to change to create that scale of change for, hundreds of thousands of people. What I'm proposing is like, let me start with 10, and then let's make that 10, 20, and let's work from there, right? I have no, I'm not under the delusion that like, we're going to pop out and be like, well, we did it. We fixed it, right? But what I think we can do if we're smart about it is prove that it can work. And then what we have to do, as we were talking about, from access and availability of resources, say, look, this is what it costs to do a minute piece of it. So this is how far off the mark we are from an investment standpoint. And so realistically, now we have to figure out how to get those resources in the right hands to the right people, and then create, like you said, the right apparatus by which it sort of levels up to what we're looking for and what we're talking about. And that again requires, me and Sam Sanders and it requires, there's
all of
hundreds
us.
of people that to do that, to have to be on the same page and have to be mission aligned and incentive aligned to do that right and to do that well. I don't know how cynical I am and that and whether or not that's possible, but I think that it's worth testing and it's worth trying, and it's worth sort of barking up that tree until we get a really good indication that we need to pivot and try something new.
I think we should take a break here in just a minute, Max. What you think? We can come back and we can talk about your the actual programs and your goals. I think that was a great introduction. Great introduction, in regards to people knowing where you're coming from and and your duties and responsibilities. So we can talk about the actual programs and whatnot. How does that sound?
Sounds
good. So IMHO family, stay tuned and tell a friend. We will be right back with none other than City of Promise Executive Director Price Thomas.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101. 1013 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 1013 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 1013 Jams.
On a lot of the things that we wanted to do when we started about 4.5 years ago, and my son had just been born, and so it was sort of the classic not a good time, right? And I have to give a lot of credit to my wife, because in having these conversations, you know, she made the astute point. She said, okay, well, first of all, when is a good time? Like, what would be a good time when the kids are 5 and 3, when they're 13 and 10? You know, what does that look like? Like, when does it become a good time? And then also she said, let's just play a little game, and I want you to tell me, if you were going to take a new job, right, what would it have to fulfill? Like, what things for you would it have to satisfy? And I said, okay, it'd have to be local, because we're here and we like it here and we've got family here. And it would have to be an organization that's on good footing and that's foundationally strong. And it would have to be, you know, in this kind of work. I've been, Montpelier to United Way to here. The nonprofit thing is sort of become a place where I feel very fulfilled. And she said, okay, well, how many of these does that job serve? And I said, okay, well, it's all of them, and then she said, look, there's never going to be a good time. So on we went. And so as
sounds like a smart lady.
That's why I married her. And so in thinking about as you start to investigate, as you guys know, organizations, you do kind of the general due diligence. You look at the website, you read the reports to talk to people, you read the 990 and all that typical academic stuff they tell you to do to discern the health of the organization. But I'll tell you, the one that did it for me was, it was a day, and it was probably right after I'd been hired in May, and we were walking through 10th and Page and through Hardy Drive with like a cooler of popsicles. And what you saw every single person in that neighborhood aged 3 to 90 and the way they interacted with the staff. And all of a sudden you saw that the staff knew everyone by name. They knew something about everybody, kid, adult, teenage, like every single person there. And all of a sudden what clicked was, oh, that's the thing you can't replicate. Like that's the thing you can't, there's no business class. There's no strategic plan. Like you cannot fabricate that connection, right? A connection to a community of people who have really no reason to buy in, because it's just barrier after barrier after barrier, right? Interacting with a group of people who have proven to them that they'll meet you where you are and help you get to where you want to go, right? And that takes years to build, right? And so if you have that, you can program around anything, right? We can come up with a program. The three of us could sit here in an hour and be like, okay, we can figure out a program that we think will move the needle. But what you can't recreate is that. You can't recreate that level of ingenuity, that level of intimacy with a nonprofit, right? And so that was the thing that, I was kind of had that moment. I was like, all right, we'll be all right. Like we'll be all right, because we can lean into that, right? And when we have to be very committed to preserving that. And then programmatically, everything you build is a spoke off of that hub, right? Everything you build, now you have the ability for the community to either buy in or to give you feedback, to say, look, this doesn't work, and we have to accept that, right? And we can rock with that. So it was that point, sort of early in that process where I felt like we had something unique and we had something different and something that we could really build on. And so then programmatically, our focus again is child-centered. It's dual generation, but it is really about creating opportunities for our youngest and understanding their path forward, right? With the understanding that they're they will be us someday, and what we want to do is really have an opportunity to influence them when they're young and influence again, but their entire family, right? It has to be built on that family unit and built on whoever their caregivers are, like we talked about off air, of buying in and really wanting to be involved with us. I think I view us as co-pilots, right? Like I'll tell you when to turn left if you need it. I'll buy snacks and sing along, but you got to drive. And we want our community members to drive. And sometimes we need to be there to help and steer and show sometimes, but ultimately, you're driving. And you're going to get to where you drive us to.
Well, I must say, like, you sound real good, Price. Like everything that it sounds like you bring to the leadership of City of Promise sounds great. Now, I met you once, probably before today. Maybe we shared the same space before, but I recollect at least one instance where we've met. And then later learned of you being a new hire at City of Promise, and then heard some chatter about whether or not you were a good fit for the position. I don't know you, so there was no judgment there, but whether or not you were a good fit for the position based upon your ability to relate to the people that you were providing a service for. Sounds like you may have heard the same thing.
Of course.
But you sound spot on. You sound like exactly what the organization needs.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's not, look, I think my posture is sort of unshy in that sense. I know what I am. I know what I'm not. And that's why I married the person I married. And that's why I think even organizationally, we're not afraid to say, look, this isn't what we specialize in, but there's someone here that does. And so from a relatability standpoint, I'm not going to profess or pretend to be something that I'm not. And what I have to do is open a dialogue among myself and the community members to say, where are my blind spots? And what are things that I don't know that I need you to tell me? But I need you to afford me that same respect. There's some stuff that I know, and that's why I'm here. And we can move this thing forward together.
And that's where the team comes in too.
And that's absolutely right. Team. Absolutely right. And that's why I talk about us as passengers in a sense of, I'm not going to be dictatorial and like I've solved the problems, because again, if I could solve them, they would have been solved, right? So it requires this consortium of saying, look, there is lived experience that we have to be reverent to, right? Absolutely. And we have to intake that, and then we have to try and coordinate that in a way that then we can create output that is successful. And I mean that in every sense of the word. And I think that's one part of being the place-based piece, but part of the fact that we're
there, and that we're there, and that's why the office is there, and that's why we occupy that office, is to have that level of intimacy with the community. And my hope is to create, if at the end of the day, if we've done nothing else, it's we've created an environment where that goes both ways, right? Where when we have to have hard conversations, in either direction, we understand that it's coming from a place that we're facing the same direction. Right. We're all trying to go to the same spot, and either, you stepped out of line, I was out of pocket, whatever, but we understand that fundamentally we're not adversaries, right? And we've created that trust, and we've built that respect, so that in the moments that are inevitable, when there is a difference of opinion, it's from a point of view of like, we're all trying to hustle out the same ends, and we're moving in the right direction. But that's something that I think, like I said, programmatically aside, right, we have to understand that we're people and we're working with people, and we have to be intelligent about that.
Now let me maybe close it. We have a couple minutes left, but like with a serious question that just me knowing you, I'm sure like that you thought about this. You may have already encountered it, but as a director, what do you say to the family, the parent, the child, like that comes to you and says, Price, I respect and understand programs, the pathways, like strategically it all makes sense, but we struggling right now. Like my boy making money on the corner right now. But you telling me all these, good, wholesome ways to grow and how to get out of my situation. What do you say for families to keep trust in the program when they're face to face with experiences like that?
Yeah, I love that. And I wholeheartedly believe that we have to figure out a way as a community and as an organization to address short-term needs in the pursuit of this longer-term goal of self-sufficiency. I feel like we always do one or the other well. We're either full triage, we have, this to triage us now, or we're in the like, we're going to fix your credit score, right? And exactly like you said, if you come to me with a need today and I'm like, well, here's what we need to talk about is your FICO score, you're just going to, at best, walk out. At best, just turn around and leave, right? So we have to keep folks in the game to say, like, here's how we view the forest in the trees. Here's how we view how the short term interacts with our longer term goals. And we also have to be a little bit brutal in a sense that there are some people who do not want what we're doing. And there are some people even in community who just aren't ready or don't want to accept what we have. And that's okay. And that doesn't mean we go away, and it doesn't mean we shut that door. It means we continue to invest in those who are there, who are ready, and we continue to try and pull in as many people as we can. For me, this theory of change is kind of, again, small bites, 1, 2, 3 at a time, right? It's not just kind of you drop a net and the whole thing flips. It's we have to start to work in the, with the folks who will be advocates for us, with the folks who are ready to work with us, and continue to invest in them, but while also keep an eye on what else is going on in the ways, and I want to be very clear about this, in the ways where we feel like we have competency. Right. In those other spots that we're not great at, we need to find who those partners are. We need to find who those resources are. And we need to connect to them in a way that not only makes sense institutionally, but makes sense like for the community. So it's clear to people like, oh, I have this need, I go here. Oh, I have this need, I can go here. And this is how this all levels up to me ultimately being able to achieve my goals. I think you said something interesting of like, whatever your goals are yours, right? And so I think part of the trust building for me is not self-imposing, like, you got to move to Ivy, right? It's like, well, you can do whatever it is you want to do. And I want you to tell me what it is you want. And I want to challenge the upper end of that to a degree and say, well, have you thought about this? And you can say like, no, man, my thing is ABC. And then that's where we start. I think that we have an opportunity, and a really unique opportunity, to be a little more nuanced and a little more kind of individualized in how we help some of our community members, because we can't take it as a monolith. We can't say, well, just everyone needs the same thing, right? Because again, the inputs are different, the family structures are different, some of the trauma is different, and so we have to be responsive to that. And this all comes back to the fact that I think if we can be responsive to that in smaller numbers, we can prove that we can make something sustainable, right? And then it's a resource, it's a resource conversation, and it's something that we all need to get in on. But I want people to feel like when they're part of City of Promise, and when they talk to us and talk to our staff, that like, we know you, we know what you're up against, and we know what you're fighting with. And I expect that level of honesty from our community members, and we'll absolutely give it back, and hopefully in a way that becomes additive, in a way that again feels like we're moving together. Right. I don't want to feel like I'm pushing you anywhere. I want to feel like we're going there together.
You had mentioned the Sam Sanders, Charlottesville's city manager earlier. Do you feel like you're getting the support that the organization or maybe even you are getting the support that you need to get the job done, meet your goals, or is there something that the city could be doing to help support?
I don't think any nonprofit on earth is going to answer that. Like, I got everything I need. You know, I mean, we're in the game of saying, yeah, we need more, and we need more resources, and we need more dollars, and we need more infrastructure, and all of the things. But I am very willing to, you know, especially since we got in at about the same time, and so, you know, I'm willing to adjudicate his success and mine on progress. You know, I'm a growth guy in the proficiency growth conversation. You know, I want to see that. I want to see that tomorrow's better than today, and that you know, I want to be better on Tuesday morning than I was on Monday. And so I think that as we continue to stay tight, and you know, I think the big measure of success for us, you know, as it pertains to the city, is our level of connectivity. Is, are we shopping things together, right? Is he calling me about ABC XYZ? Am I able to reach him about things that we need to work on and that we need to do? I think part of evaluating the success of some of this nonprofit space is going to be the metric stuff, which we are all beholden to, but I think it's also going to be a little bit qualitative. Are we working better together? Are there more grants or programs or initiatives that are of multiple nonprofits, right? Is there better collaboration between like-minded, mission-aligned organizations, right? Because currently it doesn't really exist in any real systematized way. And there is a push for it. And so I think it's breaking down some of that siloed activity. I think it's breaking down some ego stuff, right? And some territory stuff. And I think it's
all true.
Being very honest about really which seems simple, is that we can do more if we do it together. You know, and
there's a novel idea.
Yeah, right. You know, and it almost sounds like it's one of those things that, like, this, it can't be that obvious, right? Like coming out from, like, it can't, right? But it exists. It really does, because you do something different than I do, and does something different than he does. But by our powers combined, we've got something pretty neat and something pretty interesting and impactful. And so trying to allow all the nonprofit leaders to take a step back, you know, and have that conversation, right? Kind of look across the landscape and say, okay, oh, wow, yeah, that's right. Because you know what would strengthen my program? Like a food security partnership. You know what else would strengthen my program? A workforce development part, right? Why, like, we need to do that. And we as a group of nonprofit, you know, leaders need to do that, and do that more often. We need a better finger on the pulse of what else is going on, because we're all sharing. I mean, Charleston's not that big. Right. And so, in the fact that it's 9 miles end to end or whatever. And so we're sharing community members anyway. We're just not doing it efficiently, and we're clearly not doing it very well.
So let's definitely stay in touch on that, because I got conversation follow up on that, exactly on, you know, on ways that could benefit you and hopefully the other organizations, you know, that we know of in town.
Of course.
For sure. You're spot on with that. But before we let you go, though, let the folks know whether they're donor or potential volunteer, or I don't know if you all are hiring or will be soon, but let folks know how to get in touch with you to get involved. Because I'm sure they like what you said, man. You're a sharp brother right here.
At cityofpromise.org is our site with all the information you need. Make sure you check us out on social media at City of Promise, and that will be full of video, full of great content. We're gonna make sure the community comes to life, and we're gonna give our community members opportunities to tell their stories, to speak their truth, to be a part of the front door of the organization, right? These are some of the most, you know, incredible and joyful and hardworking folks, and we want them to make sure that they have a seat at the table. And so at City of Promise will be your front door for all that. We're very excited to, you know, pioneer some content initiatives, and we're in talks with all kinds of interesting folks, including, you know, you guys and Charles Tomorrow and the University of Virginia. And I mean, there's so much out there that we want to pull in and pull together and lean on. And you know, we are in an area that, again, is resource rich from a dollar standpoint, but also from an intellect and infrastructure standpoint. And we are not going to be you know, naive enough to not lean into that. And also, look, we're at 708 Page Street, so we're easy to find. Our you know, our office is there in the historic West Haven neighborhood, and that's where we operate out of. And you know, it's a wonderful place to be, and I think a place that the staff feels very you know, strongly about, and that level of place-based model, I think has been good, and one that I think is being slowly replicated in other spots when you think about what's going on in Kindlewood and Abundant Life and Prospect, and there is
trailblazing,
again, opportunities to link these organizations together, to say, okay, is there a way to program, and again, Charleston not being big, but there is something to being in these spaces that we want to be in, and that we feel like we you know, we should ultimately have the community be in charge of.
Mhm.
And I think it's our job to continue to encourage that.
Yeah,
and continue to be a catalyst for that, to say that, look, we are here to facilitate.
Yeah.
We're not here to take over. We're not here to run the show. We're here to be a part of it.
That's
you
awesome,
know,
man.
and we're here to be a part of the uplift of these communities and allowing people to achieve their goals and ultimately see these young people flourish.
Right.
That's what it's about.
That's it.
Ladies and gentlemen, Price Thomas, Executive Director of City of Promise. And you know, these lines of communication are always open for you.
Absolutely.
You know, and on air and off air. Let's definitely get to work together.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes, indeed. Miss Max,
No,
you good?
That was a great interview. Thank you. For
Thank
sharing
you.
time
Thank
with
you
us today.
guys. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. I am HO Talk Show. Still here, still standing, Miss Max.
That's right.
That's right. Tell a friend, tell a friend. I am HO Talk Show, WVAI 101 Jams. If you're in the greater Charlottesville area, I am HO Talk Show streaming live worldwide as well. Miss Max, did you know we were worldwide?
Worldwide. That's what you tell me. That's what somebody tell me.
Yes, indeed. So, without further ado, Miss Max, 2023, this is an election year, an election season. And, our politicians seem crazier than ever. Respectfully.
The norm. Right?
I guess I'm not talking about our local folks. Don't get mad at me. The local folks, like, we still need that support. But no, but you know how it is. I mean, like, things just get so confusing sometimes. Because people have so many talking points on everything. Instead of getting to the truth, I want my side to win. So I'm going to phrase things in a way that give the results or the appearance that I want them. Instead of just
Politics 101.
So that's why we bring in none other than Miles Coleman, J. Miles Coleman. He's been a frequent contributor on IMHO from the UVA Center for Politics, Larry Sabado's crystal ball, because around these times he helps us kind of iron things out a little bit, clear things up. Miles, can you hear us?
Yes, can y'all hear me?
Get you back, Miles. Hold on, that's on me. All right, Miles, how you feeling?
All right, how's this?
It's pretty good, sir. Pretty good. We're gonna try to get rid of some of this feedback we're getting though. Got a little new setup, but we gonna get through it. So Miles, go ahead and catch us up to speed though, for the folks that may not be as familiar with you, but some have heard you on here before. What have you been up to since we last spoke?
Yeah, so I think last time we spoke was during the primaries, and there were some very contested primaries in Virginia, which was a little different. So since then, moved into general election mode, and both sides feel most in this election.
Yeah. Hey, Miles, I apologize. We are getting a lot of feedback back from you. So can you hear that as well?
Yes.
All right, so I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna fix it. We'll take a quick break and then fix that and be right back to you. All right.
Okay.
All right. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with Miles Coleman.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, Black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More Black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all of these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political.
Hey, Miles, can you hear us?
Yes, is this any better?
It's not letting me hear you.
Is this any better?
All right, can you hear us now?
Yeah, can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me?
All right, gotcha. Yeah, I see you talking, but
is this any better?
Be right back with you. There we go, Mr. Miles Coleman. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, how's this?
There we go, Mr. Max.
Oh, good.
Man, that was more trouble than it should have been, Miles. My apologies to you and the listeners. Got a little bit of a new wiring, new setup, but we made our way through it. Yes, indeed. So, family, thank you for sticking through with us. We are joined with UVA Center for Politics analyst Miles Coleman, also of Larry Sabado's Crystal Ball. And Miles, Max and I were saying before we went on the last break, and I think you can hear it because the feedback started when we started receiving your audio from you because of, like I said, some of the wiring here. But we're good now. And we were talking about how important politics are more so than ever, on how you don't know what or who to trust sometimes, Ms. Max, when it comes to those supposed to be making decision-making policies on our behalf. So, Miles, before we jump into this 2023 election, for those that don't know, Ms. Max, it's past Friday. Early voting started.
Yes.
For Virginia. We're talking about for this 2023 election that is coming up November 7th. So folks can get those early ballots in, absentee ballots, all that kind of good stuff, early voting. So we want to talk about some of the top pressing issues for our area, for this state of Virginia, that maybe some amendments and whatnot that's on the ballot, some of the choices that we have to make, because regardless of how dreary it gets, Miss Max, we still got to stay involved, whether we like it or not.
That is true.
Because it still affects our day-to-day. You're a business owner, Miss Max.
Mm-hmm.
So, raising a family, running a business.
All that.
Yeah, these people got your livelihood in their hands.
Yeah, this is true. This is true.
So, Miles, though, what have you been up to since we last chatted? What's been, top of your mailbox?
Yeah, so that's one of the good things about Virginia is that we have some type of election every year.
Good or bad, right?
Yeah. So I don't mind it because it's good job security for me.
There you go.
But anyway, last we talked, I think, was coming off of the primaries, or around the time of the primaries, and that was one of the kind of subplots of Virginia politics this year, because we passed an amendment in 2020 that established an independent redistricting commission. Redistricting basically got kicked to the state Supreme Court. It was not handled by politicians like it has been forever. And because of that, you had a lot of turnover in the primaries. Our Senate,
now, when you say, so I'm sorry, Mac, Miles, because I have to get you to elaborate right there for sake of conversation. So when you say redistricting, could some consider that some redlining, some gerrymandering going on, or was that a bipartisan redistricting?
Oh, sure. So, basically how it's been going on in Virginia forever is redistricting has been handled basically just like any other legislative bill. In fact, after 2010, it's handled after every 10 years after the census. And after 2010, the Republicans controlled the state House of Delegates. The Democrats controlled the state Senate. And they kind of came to this deal where basically each chamber gerrymandered their maps and the other side signed off on it. So, you had a lot of these very jagged lines, very, very, very ugly maps. So we passed this measure in 2020 to establish this independent commission, basically made up of some legislators and some people from the public as well. It ended up going nowhere. They kind of got into fights over what criteria to use, that type of thing. So it got kicked to our state Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court ended up drawing some maps which are much cleaner. So that's good. But they didn't give a lot of weight or deference to where incumbents lived. So the politicians did not like that. So in the legislature, there was a lot of retirements earlier this year because you had a lot of legislators saying, oh, well, guess what? My district has been so drastically altered, I'm just not going to run again. And then, we sort of had a close primary in our district for state senate. Senator Deeds was very narrowly reelected over a strong challenge from outgoing Representative Hudson. So that's sort of where we are, or like where we were in after June. But now both the parties are sort of looking towards November. We talked about, I may be getting a little ahead of things, but we talked about early voting started yesterday. And one of the things I say is in Virginia now they give you 40 days to early vote. I said, like I joke that they give you the whole season of Lent to go early vote. So you have no excuse. So yeah.
Gotcha. No, thank you for breaking that down. And so this election season cycle with all the changes and whatnot, what seems to be sort of top agenda items that folks are campaigning on, whether that be we consider like our local district or whether we see statewide, pretty much, the things that you all have been covering there at the center, like going into this election, because we're full steam right now. Like what's some of the top issues that folks are seeming to be basing their votes on?
Yeah, so I would say on the Republican side, they're sort of borrowing from Governor Youngkin's playbook in 2021. He talked a lot about parents' rights in education. Basically, if you go to the website of any candidate running in a competitive district, almost to a T, the Republicans will talk about how we need to empower parents or something to that effect, whereas the Democrats will talk more generally about how we need more funding for education. So that's something. What's been getting a lot of headlines is abortion rights. In Virginia, especially after Roe v. Wade fell last year, in Virginia, we're one of the only state in the South that has relatively loose abortion laws.
Interesting.
Governor Youngkin has said that he wants a 15-week ban. He sees that as sort of a reasonable compromise. So he hasn't actually been able to pass that because the Democrats still control the state Senate. So they
that's what it is.
They sort of view themselves as a brick wall against Youngkin. So the Democrats have been saying, well, okay, Youngkin favors a 15-week ban now, but if he gets, if he takes both chambers of the legislature, maybe the Republicans can go even further. So that is a big energizer on the Democratic side. Is really, talking to a lot of Democratic candidates. Some of their big ticket agenda items when it comes to education or infrastructure, they'll sort of acknowledge, okay, well, this thing isn't going to get passed until we get a Democratic governor. So it's I would say that the Democrats basically broadly speaking, they're mostly on the defensive. If the Republicans get both chambers of the legislature, well, we might start looking more like a Florida or a Texas in terms of spending or gun rights.
I appreciate that. There's so many different ways that we can take it, Max. Like the big thing that stands out too is when it comes to, I'm going to call it Black history. When it comes to whether our K through 12 schools or whether our universities, and I wanted your input on it, Miles, as well. Is like people seem to be sort of in fear right now on how hard the governor could actually come down on things that may resemble anything DEI, right? Like if you bring up in certain areas, certain schools, whatnot, anything about diversity, equity, or inclusion, it's like people think those are bad words, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm curious what you've seen on how much that's playing a role right now, and if Virginia is in fact like at stake when it comes to having, going backwards when it comes to to like basic civil rights, or like when it comes to programs, right, and even offices that we have right now that may be some sort of DEI, programming. Like, are we really at risk of the state losing that if we potentially keep the current governor in office?
Yeah, I mean that's maybe a little out of my purview, I'll say. But I just say it goes back to that's something. I mean, you look at what Ron DeSantis has done in Florida on a lot of that stuff. That's basically the direction that they're warning that Virginia could go. If Youngkin gets if he gets his way, I mean, if he gets both chambers of the legislature, so very high stakes this election.
Yeah. And now, and the other issue, Max. Now, I'd love to hear you chime in on this a little bit too. Like that, our state government and our local officials, like when it comes to this, to the women's health debate, it still kind of blows my mind on how politicized like that has become within itself. Mm-hmm. When you talk about women's health, and it actually seems to me, Miles, like that a lot of people have sort of backtracked a little bit, and I think that's one reason why Virginia is a little more lenient than the other southern states is for the simple fact of, I think to just tie up all of women's health within abortion is quite unfair, actually. But as a woman of faith, I'm a man of faith as well. How much lot do we put in our government when it comes to even making those choices? You know what I'm saying? Like to you, should the government protect people and try to help them make what some may feel is the right choice, or because they say that it's in lieu of protecting the unborn child, right? Right. But as a person of faith, and I'm gonna kick it to you, but I feel like that's when it comes to community and folks and the values being instilled, not government legislation.
Mm-hmm. So you got me when you use like the phrase "the right choice," and I've said this on the show before, and I'll say it again whenever we talk about abortion rights. I do not believe in women, myself, being used as a pawn, if you will, in legislators making decisions based on their, effort to make a decision based on morals or values or what is right in the eyes of God. And I by and large kind of feel like that's the pawn that we're being used in. And I say that only because they make a lot of other decisions that affect each and every one of us, where morals and values and what's right in the eyes of God is not considered, in my opinion. And again, I don't think women, and I don't want to be used in their effort to do what is right, quote unquote, for whatever it does for the statute, political gain, control, what have you, right? Yeah. I think that there needs to be local organizations, services, what have you, to be able to help work with women throughout these type of issues.
I would agree with that.
And that's it. It's pretty, it's just that simple with me. Just that simple.
Yeah, I'll kind of say something very quickly here is, so before I started at UVA about 4 years ago, of course I tried to be as impartial as I can. I just look at basically what the data says. But before that, I used to be active with Democrats for Life of America, basically the largest group of pro-life Democrats. And, how we would always define ourselves is pro-life for the whole life,
right.
We want women to choose life, but we also recognize that, okay, well, if they do, we need to give them more resources or more health care. So, it's just, I do agree with you that it's something that all those nuances, it's really easy to lose them in the kind of back and forth politics we usually see on ads or what have you.
Yeah, and that's just it. That's just it right there. Is church and state? I think is something. It's a term that doesn't get brought up as much as it used to. Or Miles, you may hear it different, but just that term itself, because that's really to me what it boils down to is, wow, it's like, for one, our laws, our country, they say was founded, under God, quote unquote, whatever that may have meant, right? That may have meant, right? And so now I feel like that we've gotten to a point to where the younger generations can kind of see through that, and it makes them question, so what God are we talking about? Is the economy our God? Is that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have those conversations, but to me, that's how I vote, and that's what I want our listeners to take away from this, is for us to think rationally and to think through life and our situations, right? Because Miles said it perfectly. It's pro-life for the whole life, right? So empowering and getting resources to people in their community for them to be able to live a prosperous life, right? And for them to just be able to have the liberty and the freedom to be able to pursue, happiness, as Jefferson said it, right? And but it's not enough to just be I'm gonna make you for the abortion, purpose of topic, make you have this child, when the reason that you were thinking about not having it is because of the situation that you're already in. So that I'm not going to help you for the whole life, but I'm going to make you have this life. You know what I mean? So so I just want our listeners to really think about, when they listen to these campaigns and they listen to the debates and they think about their choices, to make sure that it makes sense in the whole, right? Make sense in the whole, because I don't like when it doesn't matter if it's conservative or liberal. If a liberal comes at me and just be be free to do whatever I want, it's a free country, blah blah blah, I'm like, but there's responsibility that comes with freedom, right? And then on the other hand, when a conservative comes to me and be like, well, based on what my Bible says, God wouldn't be pleased with doing such and such, right? And so when I look at voting, Max, I'm kind of we got to look at the whole and be like, all right, so when I vote, I should be voting for how the government is making life better for all individuals, right? Now, if I want to learn about the Bible, then I should be going to church. I should be talking to a Christian. I should be talking to Governor Youngkin to teach me scriptures. Right. You follow what I'm saying? You know what I mean? So I just want our listeners to kind of be mindful.
Well, this is something my dad says, who's a bit more liberal than I am. He'll say, it was kind of ironic that how when JFK was running in 1960, he had to go to great lengths to say that, I'm a Catholic, but, I'm not going to be controlled by the Pope or the Vatican. I mean, it seems like now these days, if you're a conservative Catholic and you want to go on the Supreme Court, that's front and center of your resume. That's, you kind of point to that. Oh, pick me. This is why.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. Times has changed. Like I said, it's almost the more things change, the more they stay the same. I like to be retro a lot, but it's you can't fool the youth. That was an old reggae song. You can't fool the youth.
Seems like we're constantly trying to choose between the two evils.
Yes. Yeah, unfortunately. So we need a revolution, Miles. We're gonna need you to to write some stories or tell us who's the revolutionary candidate. Now I can put you on the spot like that. But Max, I keep mixing up my Max and Miles. I gotta get my vowels right, get my vowels together. But Miles, when you were talking, let's jump back a little bit. When you were talking about the redistricting and whatnot, when it comes to polling and precincts and things like that, is there anything locally or any groups that are ushering that? Is this something that voters should be concerned about to pay extra attention this year?
I would just say generally that if you have any questions, because I know after the census, I believe Albemarle County did kind of a routine precinct redistricting. So I think voters should have gotten a notification in the mail if they got an, if their precinct was changed. Mine was, I live in Pantops. I used to kind of vote closer to Pantops. Now I don't. I was like, oh, is this the right place? So I would encourage people to go to vote.elections.virginia.gov before they go to vote, just to make sure they show up at the right place. In fact, they started this. It went into effect last year. Is you can do same day voter registration at the precinct. I think if memory serves, if you do that, they will count your ballot as they have to do some paperwork, but they do count it.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Charlottesville has not done redistricting.
I live in Albemarle County, so I pay more attention to that. But Charlottesville, we've had, we only have maybe 6 or 8 precincts in Charlottesville, so it's not as big. I think Albemarle, we have more like, off the top of my head, 30 or so, maybe less. But yeah, it's I would just direct people to vote.elections.virginia.gov. Good resource there.
Yes, indeed. We are joined by Miles Coleman, political strategist. So Miles, so you mentioned a couple of things. Like, what else is really at stake, coming up for this election? Particularly, folks who may be in our immediate listening area, but not necessarily. If we think about Virginia statewide, right? Like when people think about, this election is, like Virginia could go one or two ways this election, and I know you already mentioned, like the women's rights piece, and the Republican governor with the Democratic House and whatnot. But is there anything else or any of those you want to emphasize?
I would say that Youngkin and the Republicans talk about how they're very much trying to flip both chambers of the legislature, but the Democrats, coming at it from their perspective, they hold the state Senate, and they're trying to win back the state House of Delegates. Both chambers are very close. So maybe if Democrats get both chambers of the legislature, just over this past summer, it was sort of an ordeal for the legislature to pass a budget. So maybe if Democrats get both chambers, they'll have more leverage against Youngkin when it comes to negotiating a new budget at some point. And I would say, in terms of the stakes for Youngkin, he kind of won't rule out a presidential run. I do think it's getting a little late for him. But if he wants to, or even if he runs down the line in 2028, that seems far off. But in politics, there's always another election that kind of comes up faster than you would, I think. If Youngkin wants to have any sort of a legacy or kind of some conservative policies that he can point to if he ends up taking that plunge, he's going to want to have what we call a trifecta, both chambers of the legislature. So I would say those things as well.
Yeah. I got to ask you, Miles, in your work, and try to be as honest and transparent, because I know that you have a job to do to remain neutral, and I'm totally respectful of that. But just in everyday conversations with folks, government seems to be more out of order than ever. Sides seem to be more self-serving than ever. So I kind of want your opinion as a citizen more so than a strategist on what's your feelings about this? Where do you see us as a state, as a country, when it comes to any kind of moderation? Because it's nobody's moderate anymore, right? Nobody's meeting in the middle anymore.
Yeah, it is very unfortunate. And I kind of said earlier, I'm I'm basically a moderate pro-life Democrat myself. Actually, my best friend is a pollster in my home state of Louisiana. He's like a Jeb Bush, John Kasich type of Republican.
Wow.
I think we get along so well because we're both politically homeless,
Right.
and I do think that in terms of I think it's definitely easier for the extremes to be heard in the media. But I think there are a lot of people sort of in the middle who are constantly having to pick between whatever the lesser of two evils is. I kind of joke that my basically whenever I go back to New Orleans, my extended family is conservative Italian Catholics, and they vote as you would expect. I kind of joke that when I'm talking with my friends, I look like Joe Manchin, but when I go back home, I'm like Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. That's how I look like, right? So it's just not. It is definitely frustrating how, in some senses, we seem to be like two different countries. Other than say the 4th of July, 9/11, there just don't seem to be a lot of things that hold us together, and I don't see that. I don't see what the easy solution is. That's why one of the things we try to focus on at the Center for Politics is civic education. I'll be talking to people, just about this stuff, and they'll be like, Miles, why are you so interested in politics? I'm like, they'll tell me, it's so nasty and mean. And well, I say, well, it's not going to change until we get good people in it. So, so that's what we try to do. We try to promote civic education, that type of thing. So that's, but yeah, it is. And I know that kind of looking forward to next year, I'm sure it's going to be a very nasty presidential election, and we're going to see a lot of that still.
Yeah.
Have we missed anything? Like, did we not discuss something that we should really be paying attention to for this upcoming election, Miles?
I think that's basically it. What I'll emphasize too is that I'd be very surprised if either chamber of the legislature isn't decided by more than a few seats. It's going to be very close. And it's one thing I'll point to is back in the primary. Charlottesville, Albemarle had, if you look at the early vote, we had one of the best turnouts, I think the best turnout in the whole Commonwealth. So I would like to see that again. I think that would be that would definitely be a good look for us.
Yeah, I remember you mentioning that. Yeah, kudos to us on that. But it's the I remember a time, Max, where it's like if it was Republican leadership or Democratic leadership, it was like people just went on with their lives, right? You know what I mean? It was like, okay, yes. Kind of, like the votes, the legislation is going to sway kind of how it sways, but I still got to figure out how to live my life through it. I feel like we made a hard turn when sort of the stakes got up, you know what I mean? Like the ante got increased. And so it's almost like a natural evolution, right? Like I mentioned in some of the other facets of society and why we vote the way we vote, right? It's like we had to start getting more and more extreme, like to win, right? Like we had to drive more difference between, like one side from the other.
Sure.
I think that's a negative.
Yeah, well, like it's like one of my friends said, every election feels like it's existential, right? And it shouldn't, necessarily be like that. It's I sort of got involved in politics with 2008 and Obama, but a lot of people, and I'm a millennial, and a lot of Gen Z got involved because of the backlash over Trump, and they didn't like where he was taking our nation. So, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But the flip side to that, though, Miles and Max, is but then the argument is that you become status quo. And so that's not a good thing either, meaning that, we seem to be in a generation, to where like uprising is just in the DNA. And it's like to be moderate is almost to be status quo. It's like you want to be on the side of right and not on the side of wrong.
Yeah.
And to sort of give in at all to some shows a sign of weakness, instead of us working together on our similarities. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like is status quo, is being moderate being status quo? Is that showing a weakness to give some to get some? You know what I mean? I feel like currently, Max, it's like you have folks who say, no, like this is the way it should be. And it's either side. I feel like both sides are doing that right now.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I think that, of course, Miles can speak about it politically, but, as we kind of live in a world where right is wrong and wrong is right. So,
Well, it's like, this is what Dr. Sabato says, it's almost like we live in a post-truth society where,
that's it.
if one network is saying that is saying something that you don't agree with, well, look at another network, they're saying something you may agree with, right? And I don't think that's, it like feels like we're not often on the same page when it comes to, just where we're getting our facts from,
Yeah. And the last question I have for you, Miles, was it makes me think about generationally and how like every generation, our parents looked at us and was like, oh, like these kids are crazy nowadays. Like they don't know anything nowadays, they're out of control, right? Kind of feel like every generation does that. So politically, like, the history that you've seen, like, is this just a cycle or are we more at odds than ever before?
Yeah, it's I think we are, because I talked to my grandparents and their mentality, they have a more sort of vote for the person type of mentality. I don't think social media has helped because you can get into your sort of bubbles of I only talk with Democrats or I only talk with Republicans. So I don't think that's helpful, but I get one sort of bright spot is I do feel like there are always more people than I expect to kind of want to talk to the other side, or at least have some sort of dialogue in between the parties. But yeah, it's hard to say both sides are equal when one side wants to take away voting rights and that type of thing, or rights for transgenders, etc. So
there's something should be kind of common sense, you would think, right? Like basic human rights should be both sides, both parties.
Yeah.
You would think. But Miles, Max, did you have any other questions from coming to make sure you close out and folks know how to reach you to follow up on your work, Miles?
Yeah, I don't. I was over here doing a frantic Google search on something that I wanted to ask Miles about and couldn't find the information. I know that the city of the residents, I guess, of Charlottesville discussed something about a single vote, single member, something to that effect. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, Miles, when it comes to electing our city council members or something to that effect. And so I was going to ask you a question about that and how it may benefit, or what type of impact I guess it would have on the city if we were to move to that type of vote, but I can't find information.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think we are really more national and state, but I do I do remember hearing some mumblings that we may move to a ranked choice type of system. Maybe that's something that some other cities have been adopting. The whole point is that ranked choice, it's supposed to help moderate candidates or candidates who can build coalitions. So maybe something we can talk about next time if it gets to that point. But that's something I'll keep an eye on.
Yeah. Thank you for knowing what I was talking about.
No, Miles, thank you as always. But yeah, leading up to the election particularly, but of course beyond as well, if folks want to follow your work and even check in for any updates, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm basically always on Twitter, or I should say X now, which I don't like what Elon Musk has done. But anyway,
You have to pay a subscription soon. You know that, right?
Oh yeah. Oh, I hate it. But for now, it is J Miles Coleman at on either X or Twitter. And if you go to centerforpolitics.org/Crystal Ball, our newsletter is free. So I'd encourage everyone to sign up for that.
All right. Awesome. Sounds good. Miles, thank you as always. Until next time, be safe.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hold on, wait. You're listening to In My Humble Opinion, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Visiting tgblaw.com.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
You can do it, baby. Do it.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
Yep. Still here, still standing. Sir Charles, Miss Max. And by popular demand, Miss Max. You know what that is in the background, don't you?
I hear it. It's been a minute.
It's the questions. Well, guess what? Since it's been a minute, you have to call to request an increase in your mailbox.
Something.
Because your mailbox got your ass Max sitting there. Yeah. So family, Sir Charles, Miss Max. You know what? This should be good because Max has no idea which one I'm selecting today. So we're gonna kind of put it on the spot like we used to do back in the olden days.
All right, what you got?
You ain't nervous.
What you got?
You look a little nervous over there.
I ain't scared, Charles. I ain't scared.
Oh man. So let's see. Make sure everybody can hear us loud and clear on this one. So Max, there was apparently some talk recently, in regards, and it's funny that we're coming off of the political debate too, as far as rights and freedoms and whatnot, things of that sort, and like the evolution of people. And then when it comes to questioning things later, some say that comes from, humans are smarter now, we evolve, right? It's the best word for it. So here's the Ask Max question though, because this is something that apparently is happening more. I didn't even know it was happening that much. Max.
Okay.
Shows you how much I know. I thought I was in the know.
Okay.
I ain't even in the know. Maybe you were in the know. But the question is quite simply, Miss Max, who should propose? Talking about marriage. Who should propose? Because there was a conversation came up, and so listener asked, that we talk about it. Who should propose? Because apparently, of course, thankfully women are more liberated, more educated, more so than ever. So people say that the idea of a man proposing is antiquated. It's old school. Some even say that it comes from a time to where women were property, right? Comes from a time where women were looked at as like a prize for the man. So it was due process for the man to pick his. And I'm using strong language on purpose because I'm trying to show, how some folks say why this is outdated. And so the man needs to be the one to ask a lady's hand in marriage. Of course, you can even go to some cultures where first they talk to the parents, the parents approve, and then they give their daughter. So after saying all that, in the year 2023, Max, is that a tradition that holds weight or is it outdated? Who should propose, Miss Max?
Is it biblical? Help me out. Is it something in the book of Ruth?
The only thing I could think of, hey, and IMHO Talk Show Online, if we got some theologians that want to call, theologians rather, that want to call in or message, but to my knowledge, still societal, it was the same thing. It was the stories that did mention like a man, taking a wife was still at a time when women were their property.
Right.
Because mind you, and we ain't going down this path, Max, but mind you, some folks even say that, the King James version that we read left some women's stories out, some stories that they say that were written by Mary and things of that sort that would shed light on how Jesus was liberating women.
How do you know that?
Like there's some historians like they say
how they know that?
They claim they found scrolls and scriptures and stuff like they believe they were written by women like Mary Magdalene and whatnot, and they say that Jesus actually was liberating women, but the men who were in control didn't want that to get out because then they would lose control over society. But that's another topic for another day.
Yeah.
But who shall propose in this year 2023? Miss Max, if you were to meet Troy Robinson today and you said, I need that man in my life, would you drop down on one knee?
All right. So true story. True story about, let's see, married about nearly 20 years ago. I asked a man to marry me.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Okay. Max ahead of her time.
And I did that. Why did I do that? We had 2 children together. My parents were both still married in the house, were present in me and my siblings' life, and so there was like the pressure, I guess, of wanting to provide that type of home life for my children, or that family dynamic for my children. I felt like I was getting older, and all of my friends or Facebook friends rather were married.
It's a difference.
Were married, and I wanted that. And so I asked some buster. I might get sued. For his hand in marriage.
Right. I mean, it feels odd to say.
Quite frankly, I don't know what I was thinking. Like, I mean, I was thinking all those things. And for me at that time, in that moment, all that really mattered was us getting married. Him asking, me asking, that part wasn't a big deal. But neither one of us were ready for marriage, and especially he was not ready for marriage. We started marriage counseling after that, and it just devolved. And so God helped me out with that one. Sometimes when God says no, he's really he's looking out for you. Thank you, Lord.
So then in you saying, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off on your story, but I wanted to ask a question about it if you were done.
Yeah, go ahead.
So with that scenario though, like just that, like of course, let's try to cast aside the fact that wasn't the right person to ask.
Right.
But the fact that you asked, then does that mean like that the validity is there for a woman to ask?
Yeah, no, it didn't feel right. It felt out of order. This is just me personally speaking about my own experience. I would have rather it not have, transpired that way. But in the moment, it is what felt okay or right to me. Like I'm just trying to make it happen. Right. But yeah, back to your question though.
No, it makes sense.
I think there's some value in my humble opinion, some value in the man asking for the woman's hand in marriage, asking for it. Because when you got the right people with the right mindset, I'm not talking about, a man can ask for it and he cannot be marriage material for more than one reason. But that means that it knows that he's making a choice, that this is the woman that I want to be with. This is who I want to live the rest of my life with. This is who I am choosing to be a covering for. This is who I want. And so I guess asking to me feels a lot. There's a lot of intention behind that, a lot of which I haven't even defined. But you know what I'm saying? It says that he's making a choice, that he knows this is what he wants. He's accepting this responsibility by asking. And I think I would much rather be asked than to do the asking, right? As far as the woman asking, I mean, we live in a different time, and I don't necessarily know that I feel like there's something wrong with that. But you know, you got to make sure you got the right people with the right intentions and thought process about everything that comes along with a marriage, right? I think that's what really, really, really matters, is whether or not you got the right mindset, the right heart, the right type of people entering into that union, whether he asks or whether she asks, because that is what makes the marriage.
Yeah, I feel you there. Now, one thing we ain't even touch on though is you got same-sex couples too, because we've kind of been framing this conversation, from the traditionalist standpoint, with a traditional relationship, or what what defines a couple, right? So I think if you look at it from that perspective, then that kind of takes me back a bit and be like, okay, well then, if you look at it from a same-sex couple's vantage point, then it's whoever feels ready to ask first, because you kind of remove the gender role, right? So, I don't know if you have any comment on that one, but in saying that though, that still ties back in. I want to ask you this part, because something else that came up from this was, from this topic was, a man knows when a woman is ready.
Okay.
And I'm curious if you believe it or not, or if you think it holds true. And this was the reason why this individual thinks that tradition is still okay, and we can move the negativity of maybe what it was derived from, move that to the side, for the simple fact of, a woman makes it apparent that she's here to stay and she's ready. So it's like the degree of difficulty or the margin of error for a woman to take that leap and be like, I'm going to ask his hand in marriage.
Hey, it says a whole lot if the woman is the one asking, it does.
But do you think that's true though? It's like a man can ask because he knows that woman is ready. She ain't going nowhere. Which there's women have said no before. That's like all women don't say yes. You know what I mean? But a woman sometimes feels like that she never really know what to do.
Yeah.
If he's ready.
Yeah, I think there's some truth in that. I do. But, Razor has always said, because we didn't, we weren't together years before we decided to get married. And he has always said, and I think this is the honest to God truth, is that it doesn't take a man years and years and years to know whether or not I want to marry this woman or spend the rest of, marry her to spend the rest of my life with her. It doesn't take that long. So when people are engaged for 6, 10, 15 years, but this man has no intention on marrying you. Yeah, I mean, it can be harder to tell. It depends on, it's subjective, depends on the man. It can be harder to tell when a man is ready for marriage, yes. But we got open communication in the relationship, then the two of you ought to know where the other stands.
Very well said. Very, very well said. We always let you close. Ask Max, do you have any question for me? Because that was a perfect closing statement. We could have left it right there, but but that was Ask Max for the day.
I mean, what do you think? Like, I know you asking for a friend, right? Like asking for a friend who should propose, but
and this apparently was a viral topic, right?
I'm teasing.
But it still was a conversation I had with a friend, though, that pointed me to this, said we should talk about it. But the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like I am old school at heart, at soul. But I don't let tradition stand in the way either.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, because sometimes traditions and even antiquated belief systems can hold up progress
Right.
when God is trying to take you to another
Mhm.
level.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So yeah. So I mean, short answer, like I don't think it matters.
Mhm.
You know, I don't think it should matter. Now let me add this caveat to it
Mhm.
though. You know that when I talk about me being old school traditionalist, I still hold men, you know, like to a high regard. Like I still do believe like that and you know, same for like same sex couples, like the male of any relationship, I still feel like has certain responsibilities inherently.
Yeah.
That's what makes male female, right? It's
Mhm.
it's like there's certain roles, and again, you know, regardless of what your relationship makeup may be, that's a conversation to have. Just like
Mhm.
heterosexual couples go through therapy and realize and gotta agree before we move in together,
Mhm.
before we get married. What does this look like?
Mhm.
So you know, so it don't matter what your relationship makeup is, like you should know what it's gonna look like going
Mhm.
forward, or you're
That's
gonna be
right.
unpleasantly surprised
That's
when
true.
that person doesn't do stuff that you just thought that they should have done,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So then, yeah, so when it comes to proposing, same thing. I feel like either side can take the leap.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like whenever you're ready, you know. I mean, I don't know, because like I never really understood like what led to somebody saying no in the first place. Because I
Mhm.
don't know, like maybe it's me, but I feel like that's a conversation that you should have had. It's like you should already know if your relationship is at that point,
Mhm.
right? And then if we having these conversations and we building together and we already know what it's going to look like, and we've said, okay, like whatever it may be, when I get this job, that's the last thing on my list, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
be ready to settle down or whatever
Right.
you want to call it, buy a
Right.
house, move in together, whatever. Or maybe when I finish school, then you know I'll be ready. Whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
I feel like a strong relationship, both sides are gonna know
Mhm.
when it's time.
Mhm.
So either side can ask.
Mhm.
Now don't have it be a stalemate relationship.
Yeah.
And then both of y'all looking at each other like, well, you know I'm ready.
Uh-huh.
I wrote it down for you. When you gonna
Uh-huh.
ask?
Uh-huh.
You know?
Right.
You know?
You know, I think another part of this though is that, and I don't know the statistics on whether or not marriages are up or down, right?
Mhm.
In terms of the number of marriages.
Oh damn.
But
Damn.
but I don't even know if this is a conversation
Mhm.
that people are having, because as times changed, fewer and fewer people, I guess, are even desiring to be in a marriage. You know,
Mhm. Right.
we share bills, we buy a house together, we live in the same home, we may have a child in common. And
Mhm.
so what do we need to even why do we need to get married? Why do we
Yeah.
need that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's real. That's real.
So
That's real. But that makes me think though, Max, is like that highlights why there's so much more to a quote unquote marriage
yeah.
than just getting a paper and a ring.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because to be married, you know, just by definition, yeah,
Mhm.
like you have those things going on, you know,
Mhm.
between two people.
Mhm.
Right now, to make it, you know, like legal, lawful, you know,
Mhm.
I get all that. And there's, you know, and I think that's what it boils down to. Some people are now making that choice
Mhm.
of saying, okay, well, like, is this something that we need,
Right.
you know, like to be honored, like by the state? Like, what's the benefits
Yeah.
of that for us?
Yeah.
But then there's some people who's old school about it and be like, nah, you're gonna put a ring on this finger
Mhm.
if you want me to stay here, you know. So to each his own.
Yeah. The great debate.
Hey, but hey, you know, we said all that. Tell y'all figure it out.
I know, right?
You want to take us to break?
Yeah, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, more conversation with Charles and I, in my humble opinion. Stay tuned.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight are attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
I am HO Talk Show Online. Back for the last little segment for today's show. What you think, Miss Max? Should we end this one strong? As strong as we started? What you think?
Yeah, I think we got a couple of topics for you all. And these hit real close to home, talking about issues that are impacting the residents of the city of Charlottesville. We have Razor, none other than Razor joining us.
Is Razor on the
segment.
line?
Are you there? Razor, are you there? Maybe.
Let's see. Razor, is you there? Says he's still muted. All right, well, we gonna continue. I'm sure he probably jump on. We may text him or something here to see what's going on with Razor Man. But yeah, he's in studio, virtual studio. It says his mic is muted. You know. But while we're waiting for him, Max, I got one for you though.
Okay.
So our good friends, what I do with my doohickey, as they say. So our good friends over at Seville Tomorrow. Released an article that a lot of the folks probably know about. The headline is Charlottesville City Schools Teachers Clash Over New Cell Phone Ban. And the subheading says Charlottesville City Schools has enacted a strict new cell phone ban that will require all students to place their phone in a magnetically locked pouch during the day. Yeah, so that's what it's. You heard? You heard?
Yep, I do. So we have a kid, 11th grader at Charlottesville High School, and so yeah, I'm familiar with this policy.
Well, you know, we're gonna have Mr. Pitt on and whoever else, and maybe it wasn't a Mr. Pitt choice. It could have been a higher up choice. Who knows? But you know, but yeah, I recommend folks go to sevilletomorrow.org to read up on that article. But Max, the first thing it makes me think of, you know, the question is, as a parent, does it make you feel safer that for your child not to have a cell phone? Well, you know, not necessarily your child, but that's sort of the collateral of it, right? Do you feel safer with kids not having cell phones so that, you know, bad, unwanted communication can't be done during the day? Or do you feel safer when your child is able to have a cell phone so that they can at least communicate with you during the day?
I am curious to know how the whole implementation is working out, and whether or not kids are actually, you know, turning over their cell phones or whatnot. And I can only assume that this measure was put in place as a result of a lot of the things that happened during the last academic year, and just trying to curb those occurrences. You know, I personally, based on what happened last school year, feel more comfortable with my kid having their phone than not. But I think that there are other benefits that could potentially be weighed with a policy like this. For example, will our kids fight as much at school if they don't have that audience, and that audience being social media? Because that, you know, everybody knows that the phones come out when there's some type of altercation, and some of those altercations are not provoked by, but just, you know, influenced by followers, you know, people watching, and that has value and for the generation this day and age. So if it's influencing things like that, if by not having them there is less fighting, less altercations, less whatever, then, you know, I would consider it a win. But you know, I think I feel more comfortable knowing that my kid can access me if he needs to.
Interesting.
I mean, I feel more comfortable. That's not to say that I'm not willing to, you know, work with whatever the policies are.
No, I feel you. No, you know, to me, it's interesting because like that's totally valid, right? And like there's gonna be a give and take both ways, you know. So I guess you got to see like which one has the least, you know, margin of error, right? Right. Yes, indeed. But like I said, shouts out to Tamika John Charles for that article that she wrote for Seavilletomorrow.org. Y'all go check them out. And I feel like I hear Razor now. Razor, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here. How you
Man,
doing?
don't be blaming me, man. I had some issues earlier.
About the phones.
I had
Ask him
issues
about the cell
earlier.
phone policy.
You know I'm not tech savvy. My apologies, everybody.
Man, I mean, you got me tripping over here because you know we got like this new little setup and stuff. You know what I mean? Because you know IMHO, you know, is off to the moon and everything, but we got to get some of the wiring done. So, but that being said, though, you know, Lord, you know, you thought me I feel like I did something wrong, but
right.
but Razor's in the building with y'all to help close us out though. So Razor, Max and I were just talking about, and she just said, "Ask Daddy." So I asked Mama.
Daddy.
Yeah. I asked Mama, so now I'm asking Daddy. With the Robinson household,
Okay.
Charlottesville City Schools teachers clash over new cell phone ban. So there's a strict new cell phone ban that will require all students to place their phone in a magnetically locked pouch during the day. What say ye, Razor? Do you feel that that's keeping kids safer to not be able to send bad, unwarranted messages during school? Or do you feel like your kid would be safer if they're able to communicate directly with you during school?
I'm a fan of the fact that they took the phones. I think that the way that children are raised nowadays and the way social media has incited them to do nonsense, that this keeps their disconnect from, if you do it, I'll do it too. If you walk up the classroom, I'll do it too. You know what I'm saying? Such and such said this to her, and we're going to fight in front of the school and attack people. And I'm a fan of taking it away from them and getting them back to the education part of school. And if anybody has a problem with it, in my humble opinion, they should have truancy officers right there ready to remove the problem.
Okay. Strong words from the Razor Man. Yes, indeed. Yeah, and you know, I respect that. You know, and like I said, I could definitely you definitely see it both ways. But yeah, it's you know, Max. I think that I side with that side more than you, because like we said before Razor came on. I feel like that you gotta, you know, like when you're making choices and there's multiple choice, you gotta look at, okay, like what gives me the lowest margin for error, right?
Right.
And cell phones are such a distraction, you know, and there are things out of our control, you know. So while I understand we as parents want to feel like that we have as much control over our children's situations as, you know, as we can, it's like if the phone is what's making us feel more comfortable, then we also got to think about like the, you know, the negative impact that comes with the access that gives as well.
I look at it like this, Charles. Phones have become an addiction for our children. Most parents,
for us too, not just children.
Yeah, well, for people.
Yeah.
For people. So the fact that you're removing an addiction is no different than an adult having alcohol or some type of substance, because these children, if everybody was to take time and look at the usage that their children is on the phones in a 24-hour day, these children and people are no longer living life. Their faces are down, and whatever's being programmed into them is who they are. I urge anybody to take and look at the time frame that your children are looking at the phone when their eyes are open. And if that is not an addict, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Spot on. Yeah, you know, and you guys may remember a few years ago, we actually had the expert come on the show, you know, when it came to like mental behaviors around like social media and current technology. And he talked about that a lot. You know, one of the big things that they say is like, you know, it really starts with a routine. Now, of course, you know, we are sort of so wayward now with, you know, with like our luxuries. You know, to me, a cell phone is not even a phone anymore. It's like a mini computer that you can make calls on if you choose. Right. You know, so but you know, but like there's so many things like they talk about cutting down the screen time. You know, like having a bigger gap between shutting the screen time before you go to bed. When you first wake up in the morning, first thought shouldn't be, let me jump on my phone and see what I got to catch up on. You know.
Hey, Charles, to build on what you just now said, going into the bathroom and taking a number 2, you should not be accessing your phone.
Hey, watch it.
No, that's honest to goodness.
That's my free time.
You know something else that comes to mind though too, and it may be
these phones are a breeding ground
of the teachers, is that if our kids are addicts of their, you know, devices, then as with any addict, taking what they're addicted to away then makes them what? Agitated.
Good point.
Yeah. So I would think that for the teachers that are proponents of kids still having their phones while in school are also considering what they will have to deal with.
Yeah. The convicts don't run the prison.
Right.
Yeah. So you know what, Razor Max, like that brings up the, like sort of the ideology behind it of, or even take it back to the scripture, right? Where the scriptures say, like, if you exercise a demon but don't replace it with something good, it's gonna bring back even more demons, like to fill that void. So same thing, like when we think about things that are habitual, because I've heard this before too. Like they say, like you take like cigarette smoking, or if you're addicted to caffeine, drinking coffee or whatnot. Like they talk about their routine. So I think that's what's needed. It's not gonna be enough just to take away the phone. Because you're right, agitation is gonna come in, or maybe something even worse comes in.
That's called life, y'all.
So
you make them live.
Like, but Razor, here's the thing though. My point is though is that if you remove something, you got to replace it with something positive. If you remove a negative, if you don't want that negative to come back and be even stronger, it has to be replaced with a positive.
No, I'm with you.
Even though what you're saying, Razor, makes sense to us, we have to, I'm going to use this term, reach kids where they are. Like, even though what you're saying makes sense to us, we are dealing with mindsets of individuals
just hear me out.
who think completely different.
Just hear me out. There was a time that we survived without phones. So, and that was called life. That was called hobbies. That was called interacting, eating together at the kitchen table, taking a kid fishing, teaching somebody how to ride a dirt bike, ride bicycles through the park. Everything that we did during COVID, when we decided to get out the house and enjoy one another, is things that we can implement to these kids right now. We don't want, we're too busy trying to make sure that they're happy instead of making sure they have a good quality of life. Furthermore, if you love your grandchildren that aren't here yet, you'll make your children do what they're supposed to do.
But we went crazy too during COVID. Everybody was fighting to get out.
Yeah, and again, and I understand where Razor's coming from and agree with him, but it's still not a broad stroke. We can't make it a broad stroke scenario. We can't treat it the same because we have kids who think the way they do, and so we can't just say outdoors and us taking you outdoors and setting an example for you is going to be the answer to whatever they may be dealing with internally as a result of not having their phones.
We're too afraid to try because of what we fear might come behind it. I get that, right? But when you got a bad tooth in your mouth, they, like Charles said, they do replace it with something, but they pull that tooth.
That's true. Still not that simple though. There's a psychological element too.
Yeah,
call T-Mobile, shut the phone off.
So Max, like I had something business. We got a few minutes left. I had something business for Razor too. But
yes, sir.
While we're on this topic though, was any other topics you wanted Razor and I to chime in on while you got us?
On time, but I had at least two things.
All right, Razor, we gotta make it snappy.
Okay. So let's see. So the city has been discussing the option of using. Okay, everyone knows that the city has been dealing with an issue of gun violence and just crime in general. I'm not gonna say it's an uptick of it, but it's it's a concern across the city. And so our local government, our city manager, and our police department have been working together to figure out what options there are to help deter crime and just create a safer city for residents and those visiting, right? One of the ideas that's hit the table is something called a flock program. And what this program does, it uses cameras to take still photos of license plates. And the police department has access to those images, and they're then used when when dealing with a crime, trying to solve a crime, what have you. But the idea is that it also deters crime, and it's been used in other cities, and apparently has had good results, and so it's come across the table here in Charlottesville. The police department has talked about how there's a strict use of it, and officers there'll be repercussions if it's used inappropriately. It's stored in some database apart from the police department. Memory serves me correct, the images access to the police department's access to those images kind of drops off after a certain point of it being in the system. And then the Police Civilian Review Board's director also has access to the use, maybe even the program itself, just to kind of monitor and make sure that it's being used appropriately.
That's important.
But there's been some negative feedback about it. And I think the question that's come up is whether or not individuals don't want the program because of their distrust of the police department and how they'll utilize the program, or because it's an invasion of privacy.
I just don't understand how it will work, Razor. It's like I'm gonna need to read some use cases and see how this thing was successful, because I don't get how capturing, if I'm understanding it correctly, and I looked it up real quick, but how capturing somebody's license plate when they enter any given jurisdiction is automatically going to determine like a rate of crime, because all I hear is profiling. To me, the last thing I would say about it, and again, like I need more use cases to think otherwise, but like I think about on how we know when Black men get pulled over a lot of times, there's drugs and guns planted, right? So so it's like we already know that there's fallacies within a system, and it's the reason why some folks don't agree with gun registration, because part of that is also knowing everything that individual owns, including their gun. So you know if they have a concealed permit or license to openly carry or not. So when you get pulled over, they say that they know what's already in that vehicle. So I just feel like that, yeah. So then you can have a license plate from somewhere else. The person that owns the vehicle may have been involved in something else, so they're automatically getting profiled. Yeah, so I just don't see the benefit myself, Razor. Maybe I need to think about this thing.
We've seen it before. Like they used to call them blue light districts, like up in Baltimore and Philadelphia and stuff. So when we would see those things, we knew that was considered a crime area. Now I have to play, I hate to say this, devil's advocate on both ends, is that when they take a license plate and it goes into one high crime area to another high crime area, and it bings, and something happens, it kind of does tell them, okay, let's look for this car. We've seen this even in movies. In Fast and Furious, they called it God's Eye, to where it takes images of license plates and people. Like, it's not just going to be license plates. It's going to be facial recognition. It's going to be all that type thing. But they're trying to give it to us in spurts. So if they can show to where
that it's just license plate.
It's not.
Videos and
it's like saying your iPhone is only for making calls.
But even if it was just license plates, though, Razor, like I'm still struggling to see what the benefit is exactly. Because if somebody does a crime, right, then you're gonna get all of that information. For you to take a picture of somebody's license plate, that camera not following them their whole way through town. If I'm understanding this correctly, it's just when they enter, you be able to see who all's entering in your jurisdiction.
Well, it kind of does. Think about the New Jersey Turnpike. When you get on the Turnpike, it registers you right there. And then when you get off, it registers you. It does a timestamp of how fast you had to go. And that's how you get your tickets. The cops don't even have to do anything. If they can say that you went from one place to another place and they register you, I'm not saying I'm a fan of it. I'm just telling you how I believe this is going to work. They can dictate whether you made stops in between. If you went straight there, they're going to utilize. I mean, it's going to be abused because people are going to want to solve cases. So them saying that it's not true. I mean, they're human. So we're asking them to turn a blind eye and look just at protocol and not try to do what they feel the bulk of the community wants to do. And it's only going to be in our areas, our Black and brown areas for the most part. They're not going to put it over in Ivy and things like that. Yeah. Whatever the affluent white areas are, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, that sounds very messy, because it sounds like a lot of room for judgment too. It's like something happens during the time. So because you did something 2 years ago, now I got a right to pull you over and question you, and I ain't got proof if you did it. I just know you were here.
Yeah. Yeah.
we
It's
only
going
got
to
1
be a
minute.
few.
Should we hold off on the other one?
We gotta hold on.
We got to hold on, Razor. Hey, Razor.
Okay.
Razor,
Yes, sir.
like you know what Max did? Max just invited you back for dinner next show.
Yeah. Okay. Who cooked?
Consider that like an invitation, because you know, like when you first went over to Miss Max's house, and you know, like you ain't know if you impressed her or not, and then she was like, you know, well, what you doing?
Yeah,
next
I
week?
brought chicken wings.
Yeah. So consider it the same way. She got another question for you, so you gotta come back.
Okay. Fair enough.
Take us home, Miss.
Fair enough.
Great show.
Yes, y'all did.
Yes,
Great show.
Great conversation. Listen, we appreciate our listener audience. Thank you. Without you, in my humble opinion, couldn't do what it does, right? Take care. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
Real hip hop celebrating 50 years of hip hop right here.